My name is Maro Camburelli, and I'm the Avie Bennett Chair in Canadian Literature in the Department of English at the University of Toronto. I'm the organizer of this event, and I will be your host this evening. It's wonderful to have you all here, all 600 of you registered and counting. But where is here? Here for me is Toronto, specifically the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. More specifically for me, here is the intersection of Getty Onigaming and Ishpadina, the Anishinaabe names of my neighborhood. Getty Onigaming in Anishinaabe means at the Old Portage, and it refers to Davenport Road's history as one of the longest First Nations trails in Ontario. It linked the Don and Humber rivers and connected Indigenous settlements with their fishing and hunting grounds. Ishpadina, also Anishinaabe, means a place on a hill and refers to the escarpment at that intersection, where the Baldwin Steps link Getty Onigaming to the upper part of the escarpment, where Spadina House and Casa Loma are located. Knowing the Anishinaabe names of my neighborhood, seeing them marked on the street signs has been very important to me, for it has helped transform land acknowledgement for a formulaic protocol into grounded materiality. This place is still home to many Indigenous people from Turtle Island, and I'm privileged and honored to live and work on this land. To honor the history and continuous presence of Indigenous people on this land, the inaugural event of the series in 2015 featured Indigenous writing and writing about the land, specifically Cherokee Greek author Thomas King, along with environmentalist Naomi Klein. When I mentioned my plans for that event to Stolo author Lee Maracle, she asked if the event could include a Stolo robing ceremony to honor Tom King. I said yes, and so the first Literature Matters event opened with Lee Maracle. Lee Maracle's death this last November came as a shock to many of us, and I think it's appropriate to dedicate this event tonight to her memory, to take a moment to remember and honor that extraordinary woman. Lee Maracle was a Shiam, which in Halkomelin, her Stolo language, means knowledge keeper, law keeper, spiritual logician, historian, orator. Lee was all that and much more. The author of many books, books of poetry, short fiction, novels, life writing, and oratories, she was one of the first Indigenous authors to claim a space in Canada's literary landscape. She emerged as a powerful literary and activist voice, a veritable trailblazer. She was a generous mentor to Indigenous and non-Indigenous writers alike, an inspiring teacher, a loyal friend, great fellow traveler, and above all, a relentless and vociferous critic of colonialism. Her laughter, such a big part of her MO, filled my heart with hope for a better tomorrow. Lee's words and wisdom will continue to inspire and shape our journey toward the good life for generations to come. Before I turn to the two spectacular authors with us tonight, I'd like to acknowledge that this annual series of talks is made possible by the generous support of the late Dr. Avie Bennett. Dr. Bennett was a visionary businessman and one of the greatest philanthropists in Canada, whose generous endowments to the University of Toronto have made it possible to support a large number of major endeavors. And of course, an event like this one involves a lot of work behind the scenes, and it is with great pleasure that I wish to express my deep thanks and appreciation to Kyle Kineszczuk, a poet and doctoral student in the Department of English who has been instrumental in helping me get this webinar off the ground. I would also like to thank Billy Johnson, another doctoral student in the Department of English, for his technical support with the poster program of the event. And of course, Tavlin Purewall, my indefatigable research assistant, also a doctoral student, for organizing the registration and other administrative details. Finally, a few words about webinar etiquette. Since this is a webinar, as you've already figured out, You will remain, unfortunately, invisible and silent, but not quite. You will be able to post, as you have already begun doing, comments and questions at the bottom of your screen. And I will be happy to pass them on to the speakers at the end of the evening after they finish their talks and after I hold a brief conversation with them. In the event of any technical difficulties, and if we get disconnected, please use the same link to join again or contact the email you received upon registration. And now to the real reason why you're here tonight. It is an incredible honor and great pleasure to introduce to you Katerina Vermette. Metty from Treaty One territory, she's an award-winning poet and novelist, indeed a writer who has excelled in all the different forms and genres in which she has published, from poetry to fiction, from graphic novels to children's books. I will not take time to list all her books' titles or the awards they have won. You already have these details in the programs you've received. So without any further ado, here is Katerina Vermette.
Hello. Oh, there it is. Hello, am I here? Oh, okay, I have spotlighted. I am in the spotlight and I have a good light. And hello, good evening, everyone. I would like to first acknowledge my territory. I am here in my home territory, Treaty One, heart of the Métis Nation, Winnipeg, and right over here to my, what is this, left? I have the Red River. That's flowing just a few meters away, quite a few meters away. But she is our source and the reason we are here. And I always like to make sure that we acknowledge her in the acknowledgement of this place. I want to thank everyone for being here. I went through the participant list. I see some familiar names. Hello. Thank you to all the organizers for putting this together. And it doesn't look like we have any bombers, but I'm so anxious about bombers. I find them so invasive. But but if there are any bombers that sneak through, please just can you not for today? I will promise to do something with you tomorrow. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be visiting. Now, part of what we're supposed to do here, I told everyone I was going to have a timer, so I'm going to put my timer on so I don't go over time. And part of what we were supposed to do today is talk about our writing and our process and everything that we put into our work, which of course Richard and I talked at length over emails of just about different things we were going to do, but our notes are kind of like how we do these things. And I really like to speak from the heart whenever possible. Samaro talked about Lee and Lee, the great loss. Also recently, Harold Johnson, another great loss. But I think about Lee and Lee, I was privileged enough to be taught by her. And I was privileged enough to speak and be with her and listen with her many times when she spoke from the heart. So I'm inspired by our teachers and elders to do that whenever possible. So my talk today was really thinking about what I'm doing right now, which is trying to be on sabbatical. And the gods laughed when a writer tries to be on sabbatical. But also, I've been diving into some poetry, and so I wanted to share a little bit about what I was doing. But basically, the way when I read this title of this talk, Story Making, I was actually incredibly intimidated by that idea, because so often I feel like I don't know what I'm making, and I don't know what I'm creating into story. I mostly just feel like I'm gathering all these things together into a big pile of mess, and then just editing them and editing them until they become hopefully sensical. But mostly I was very intimidated by the idea of this talk, is because it comes at this tail end of this long pandemic years. I feel totally pandemicked out. And I know I'm not alone in that. My sabbatical that was supposed to happen, my exciting sabbatical, I've been going for years and years. So I finally I was supposed to take 6 months off. to just write and finish projects. And of course, the gods laughed, and our daycare was hit by rolling positive tests and closures. And thankfully, everyone was okay, because it was a very anxious few weeks. But also that it meant that my kids were home with me on my perfect sabbatical time, and I was grumpy. My kids are almost 2 and 4, so they demand all of my attention. So writing was not happening. Story making was not happening. Nothing was happening, except, that frustration that we all have when we are at that point when we're privileged enough to just be annoyed by the pandemic, which of course we all are, but that's okay. It will pass, or it'll normalize, or whatever. So the writing didn't happen. The novel that was supposed to happen was not happening. I had this brilliant idea for a novel that I was going to, I'm still going to write it, but it involves a lot of processing of childhood trauma. It was going to be happy. And the idea of like how we get through that in order to become, human adults, hopefully with adult-like behaviors. So when my kids finally got back to daycare, and I was supposed to come into all this writing, nothing was happening. It was just like, I was at the tail end of the last couple seasons of Grey's Anatomy on Netflix, and so I binged those. So I mean, if that's productive, then definitely I was being productive. And I had never experienced, and this was like 2 weeks ago, I had never experienced that kind of writer's block before. I've always been the kind of person that has had jobs and work and gone to school and really just written on the sides and written over here and written over there. And I've been able to, in the last few years, write full time basically, but I've also taught a lot and mentored a lot and done things like this a lot. And so there's always been distractions and movement. And when I was finally at this place where there was no movement, nothing was happening except for the very, real drama that happens on Grey's Anatomy, that really distracts you in a really fun way. Well, not so fun way. So it just brought up this anxious energy and no writing, just shoveling, which, thankfully, I had a lot to do every day because it's Winnipeg and there's so much winter happening. And I was just so frustrated with this ample time coming before me and having nothing to actually fill it with. So what I do, I rarely have writer's block per se, because I always have something else to kind of dabble in. So one of the things I did was I've gone back to the poems that I've memorized. And in doing that, I went way back to the very first poems I ever wrote, and the parts of them I still remember, including, and this one poem that I wrote when I was 10. And because I'm not going to do a lot of reading, I'm going to read one poem at the end of this. I'm working up to it, but I'm going to read this poem I wrote when I was 10 because I want you to know how freaking adorable I was. This poem, I'm just going to read it, and then I'll tell you what it's about. It's really obvious what it's about. It's awful. It's called The Sky. I did memorize it. I just wrote it down because I wouldn't have been able to remember it. Too nervous. When I look up at the sky, when I look up higher than high, I see your face looking down at mine. You are the sky which makes me dream of happy things or of horrors and screams. But if I hear those horrors and screams, I am comforted to know you are looking down at me. I think it was pretty. It's a pretty faithful version of what I put together when I was 10. There was like some grammar and, definitely some awful rhymes. I had no idea about like meter or anything like that. I was just rhyming, freewheeling rhyming. And it was funny because the memory of that poem brought up the time of that poem, which I wrote some more. I started just thinking about that time in my life when I was 10, and it was when my mother and stepfather were actually involved in this church that was kind of a cult, but not really a cult. But so I was fed this version of God as like this sky being looking down at me, and giving me, bad things and good things, and then comforting me with dreams. And it's hilarious to look back on this. So it actually prompted actual writing was starting, and I call it bad poetry because I think all poetry is bad in its inception. When I write bad poetry, it's all just rambles, like, God praise. Like, it's because I was talking about church. Creator praise all my beautiful editors because they have chopped through some rambling bits and helped me make things better. But at the inception, I tend to just ramble on these long poems. And I rambled on this long poems about the church that was not a cult, but it was actually a cult. And all the fun adventures we had in that you can have in a cult when you're 10 years old. And then went from this 10-year-old rhymester to like this 12-year-old precocious kid that like vehemently denied Christianity and left the church. And it was a big deal to me and my parents, but I was lovely. And it just became these long rambling poems, and I stopped because I didn't want to fill my sabbatical with all these bad poems. I'm supposed to be writing a novel. I'm supposed to sit down and write this novel and get it all organized and make a outline, because that's what us novelists like to do, very professional like that. So the whole thing was I was supposed to do that, but I was having so much fun with this rambling poetry and remembering those things about, like, God and skies and everything, and then slowly having to hack them up and edit them away. I believe all writers have to edit, right? Except for Richard Wagamese. Richard Wagamese always stated he doesn't edit. He goes out. I might be getting this wrong, and I'm so sorry, but I just remember hearing him say that he goes out into the woods or the nature, and he talks with Creator, and then he goes and he writes, and it's something that comes right from Creator, which is lovely, but not my experience with writing. I also think that, he's probably thinking, Creator's giving him something and he's thinking while he's walking. So arguably, he's doing a little writing, but I'm not going to argue with him because whatever he was doing, he was doing right. I edit like crazy. So I've been making these long rambling poems, letting them be bad, which is something a writing teacher once told me. Just, write crap. Just like, just let it be crap. Let it be shitty work, and just get it out. And that's usually where I start when I'm teaching writing, is I start with free writing, because I think there's just something about like letting that judge go. And I realized, probably like, I'm talking like yesterday, that I was being that judgy person, that judgy. I always advise everyone to let go of that judgy, that I always say to just ignore and shut down, because it stops you. It stops you from doing everything but shoveling. And what else was I doing? Watching, binging on Netflix. There's so many good shows to watch. There's so many bad shows to just pass the time watch when you work at home. So really, it was letting go of that, taking my own advice, letting go of the judge, and just letting this bad poetry kind of flow. And it is bad. And I'm going to share with you, this one is the one I edited the most, because I love reading something new whenever I'm doing things. I like to read from novels that I've written, obviously, but I also love to challenge myself, because I came to public speaking very, very reluctantly. And I like to continuously challenge myself with reading and poetry. It makes me feel like what writing is supposed to be, which is what this poem is about. It's all about that first reading. And it's the other, and in there's a section that I'll come at the beginning of the bad poem. And I call it bad just because it's not lyrical like it's supposed to be, and balancing and whatever. It's really just words. But it's the other poem I remember reading when I was 15. So that's what I'm going to read. And then we're going to talk to the amazing Richard Bennett, who is my privilege to have known him for as long as I have. He has inspired me since way before I knew him. So a really long time, because now we're old. And this is called Make Beautiful. And it's because I dated all these things. This is 1992. That's when I was 15. You can do that math. I always say my first public reading was when I was 26, when I was a young mom, stuffed with beer, finally at the mic, got it over quick. But actually, I realized just now, my first public reading was at a funeral. I didn't read myself, but my poem was read. I was 15, overcome. I wrote in pencil and erased until the paper was soft and almost see-through. And the poem rhymed. It said, shed a tear for days passed by, for all the times now gone. Shed a tear for all the memories when the sun had shone. Also a kind of a ripoff of Patience by Guns N' Roses. I cringe now, didn't even notice. I was half-assed sheepish only after it was read, when relatives came up to me with hands hesitantly put to my shoulder. They said it was nice. The poem I had written and was read by someone else was nice. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to be reminded. I maybe blushed, mostly because I was embarrassed, but I also knew in that moment it didn't matter. The poem had already done its job. For me, it held my grief, took it out of me, and made it beautiful. Cringy, but beautiful. I didn't read myself till years later. My poems held only in journals. I always thought the whole public reading thing, still do, was a ripoff for a job that was supposed to take place in hold-off spaces filled with the sounds of scribbling and, hermitage. And so standing in front of people, reading your most intimate thoughts out loud felt like the furthest thing from being a real writer to me. The action of writing makes you a writer. Like Marvin Francis said, my late friend Marvin Francis, if you're a writer, if you're writing. That's his quote. You're a writer if you're writing. That's it. It's in the doing. I don't believe in good. No one is good and everyone can be. Good is completely subjective. We know this because for many, many, many years, good was only one kind of person. Good is as colonized as everything else. Good doesn't matter. I think writing is one of two things. It's for you or it's for other people. If it's just for you, it's pure action, activity, words to the page and done. Breathe and feel better, hopefully, done. If it's for other people, then there's another step, a long, long, long step, taking the scrolled thoughts and making them legible for others. But that's it. It's just writing. The rest is business. We don't do art to be good. We get good at doing art. The good part is the love of it. And you got to love it because you do a lot of it. And if you don't like this pen to paper or fingertips to keys, then you really have to find something else to do. Then you really are not good from the offset. But if you love them, the rest is only drudgery. I forget this. I forget this as I'm always distracted with all the alwayses and everything else's. And I knew this. I knew this as a mourning 15-year-old with helpless, hopeless rhymes and no real love for myself. But I knew how to put my pain into action. I don't know how I did that, but I was so grateful I did. And it was awful, but it still made it beautiful. And I I really understood that the rest didn't matter. And I hope I remind myself of that now. See, it's still a bad poem. I still got to polish it up and make it beautiful in a different way. But those are my thoughts. That's my thoughts on writing and writingness. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. If Samaro comes back, if I introduce Richard.
Well, I'm here and I want to say thank you. It's the first time I've heard, and I probably the same applies to our attendees, such an inspiring talk about badness, about writing bad poetry and the good that bad poetry can do. So thank you so much for sharing with us your I see a message that I don't know what to do with, so I'll try and get rid of it. Sorry
I
about
don't know
that.
what to do with any of them.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your experience of having a writer's block and yet going through it. We'll talk more about that after we hear our second speaker. And it's such great pleasure and real honor to have with us tonight another wonderful writer, Richard Van Kam, Klitsodene from Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories. Since his very first book, The Lesser Blessed, an amazing novel that has been adapted as a film under the same title, Richard, not unlike Katerina, has demonstrated his astonishing versatility with different modes of writing or telling, storytelling, from novel writing to short fiction, from children's books to graphic novels, and has accrued a long list of awards and commendations to prove it. So Richard, here it's, the floor is yours.
Masicho Samaro, Masicho, Katerina, that was so beautiful. What a perfect welcome. Masicho, I want to say Dante, Sagya Masi. My friends, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm in Treaty 6 country, Edmonton, Alberta. And actually, I'm watching the moon rise. And I think it's really beautiful that we can all watch the moon rise together wherever you are. And I say welcome. I'm so grateful to be included this year into this wonderful series. I've known Samaro Cambarelli for probably 20 years, I think officially as of next year. Samaro Cambarelli was my instructor, my professor at the University of Victoria. And I stand in continual awe of everything that Katerina Vermette touches and publishes. She is unstoppable. I am in awe, and I'm inspired continuously by what she does and how she does it. And I think we just all saw why. So we were talking about the process of writing, and I'm going to tell you a little story about how I got fired. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And this is all true. And I share this to humble myself before you, because people say, how did you write 27 books in 27 years? And I'm here to tell you that I couldn't have done it had I not been born and raised in Fort Smith, Northwest Territory. So I just want to locate myself very quickly. So I'm 50 years old, my friends. I've never been happier because I've never been more grateful for all that I have. I think the pandemic, the gift of the pandemic is for many of us, Katerina as well. I'm sure all of us were hopping on a plane 2 or 3 times a month to tour and sell our books and to make a living. And that all went away 2 years ago with COVID. So now how many of us make a living is in our offices and often wearing our pajama bottoms with our fancy stuff up top. And I'm just so grateful that I'm home and I'm writing every day and I'm healthy, and I'm grateful you're all healthy and you're home and you're safe. But I want to tell you about how I became a writer, because I'm so grateful we were able to acknowledge the late and great and immortal Lee Miracle. It was actually Lee Miracle who gave me my wings as a writer. I attended the Inalkin International School of Writing with Lauren Simon, the late and great Lauren Simon, and Lorne Machia, you name it, Michael Paul Martin. I got to learn from Beth Cuthan, Jerry William, the late and great Mohawk poet, Maurice Kenny. But I'll never forget the day that we were all in college and we were all taking notes, and Lee Miracle was standing at the front of our classroom. And she said, the beauty of fiction is that you can find in your life what has been stolen. You can mend in your life what has been broken. You can resurrect the dead. with your writing. And I go back to that moment all the time when I'm now teaching and passing on what I know. And I just wanted to really acknowledge Lee. My favorite book of Lee's is Will's Garden. You know, we're really still trying to believe that Lee is in the spirit world with her relations. And I'm so grateful that we have her writing in all of her books and all of her magnificent teachings and stories. So I just wanted to raise my hands with utmost respect to the late and great Lee Miracle. So I want to talk about how I got fired, because you want to talk about just what we call a CLM, a career limiting move. I'm your man. So let's get back to the basics. So I was born and raised September 8th, 1971. I was born Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, the most beautiful little community, in my opinion, in all of Canada. We're officially quadrilingual. I know that Katerina said that she's in the Métis capital of Canada. Fort Smith is actually the Métis capital of the Northwest Territories, and we're officially quadrilingual. And what that means is Chipewyan, Cree, French, and English are spoken at any given time. You've heard me say it before. I'm going to say it again. We're the nickname capital of Canada. We're the hickey capital of Canada. We can two-step to anything. We got buffalo 40 miles one way. We got bison 40 miles the other way. We've got whooping cranes and sandhill cranes. And we have pelicans from the Gulf of Mexico. They come up to the Slave River. And we're the third best place in the world to see the Northern Lights. We're one of the most wheelchair accessible communities in all of Canada. And we're really proud of that. So I was born and raised, and like a lot of you, children of the 70s and 80s, I grew up reading Judy Blume and S.E. Hinton and Stephen King. I had the best of the best with pop culture. You know, I think we actually pirated every possible channel, because when I grew up, I'm like, did you guys have HBO and the new TNN and movies, you know, Movie Central and the Movie Channel and Night Tracks? And people are like, dude, no, we only had one of those. I'm like, we kind of had all of them. So I grew up obviously a huge Star Wars fan, but also Aliens and Predator and you name it. I loved it. I watched it. I inhaled it. And I certainly would not be the writer that I am today, or certainly wouldn't be the comic book writer, or the graphic novel writer, or the baby book writer, had I not had the best of the North and the best of the South. How I got fired is very interesting. So when I was 19 years old, I had an aha, and my aha was, as a huge Stephen King fan and Judy Blume and S.E. Hinton and Savage Sword of Conan, a huge fan of reading. I remember feeling something like an epiphany, and it was a crystallization. It was, you know what, this is great, but nobody's telling our story. Nobody's talking about, you know, making nunchucks out of a hockey sticks and a bicycle chain. Nobody's talking about the bullies and the romance and the kimooch. And the kimooch, for those you don't know, is Cree for when you're on the sneak. You know, you're 46, you're suddenly single. Guess what? You're on Tinder. Guess what? You are on the kimooch. You're on the sneak. So nobody was talking about, you know, the hickeys and the romance and the makeups and the breakups. And I decided one day, and I remember saying out loud, I want to write something that I would like to read. And I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to tell the whole truth about growing up in Fort Smith. And so I ended up working on a little story called Me and Johnny. And then that short story became a novella, and that became The Lesser Blessed. It took me 5 years to write. And after it came out in 1996, I was so grateful I set this beautiful story, this really dark story, this really true story in a fictional community called Fort Simmer, because that was my get out of jail free card. Anytime somebody would say, oh my God, did that happen to you? I could always say, it isn't even a real place. It's fiction. And the whole point of that was I wanted people to let their guard down and know that this wasn't about them. This wasn't about our community. This wasn't about our people. This wasn't about the North that we knew, that this was an imaginary place and people could just relax and enjoy. So after The Lesser Blessed came out, I remember I went to UVic for my undergrad. I went to UBC for my MFA. And while I was working on my master's at UBC, I met a wonderful writer, Catherine Shoemaker. And she asked me for a little bit of help because I'm a huge comic book lover. I've been collecting comic books for over 40 years. She said, can you help me with my master's thesis? It's a graphic novel. And I said, absolutely. So it was great. It was compelling. I don't think I helped her at all, but she went on to great stuff. So I remember one day when I was teaching at UBC, I taught there for 8 years as a sessional. I taught creative writing for Aboriginal students. I remember one day she called me and she said, Richard Van Camp. And I was like, hello, Catherine Shoemaker. She says, I have been looking for you for months. I'm like, what do you mean? She says, I'm on a board. It's Books for BC Babies. We're looking for the one baby book that we're going to give away to every newborn baby that comes out next year in British Columbia. Do you know how many babies are made every year in British Columbia? And I said, how many? And she said, 65,000. And I went, wait a minute, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're going to give away 65,000 copies of a baby book that hasn't yet been written? And she goes, yes, I've gotten in touch with Jeanette Armstrong and Lee Miracle and Richard Wagamis. And, she listed off the creme de la creme. And I said, well, I'm right here. I'm your man. I'll write the baby book if you're going to buy 65,000 copies and give them away. And she said, no, it's probably too late. I mean, it's Friday. They're making a decision on Monday. I said, tell me what I need to know. I'll write this baby book for you. And she says, all right, well, it's 16 pages and there's 4-line stanzas. And well, you know what? It's a lullaby. It's a baby book. Just if you think, here's my email, it's probably too late. I'm like, well, how long did people have to write these? And she goes, well, Jeanette wrote something, Lee wrote something, Richard, they're all beautiful. It's all great. You know what? It's actually just a courtesy call. And I said, how long has everybody had this? Well, a couple months, but you know what? I just couldn't find your number. And I'm like, I'm on MySpace. Have you not heard of MySpace? And I'm on Res Fox. And she said, well, have you heard of Facebook? I'm like, nah, Facebook's a bubble. No, MySpace is where it's at. I can do songs, playlists. It's the best. I can upload photos. MySpace, right? If you ever need to get a hold of me, MySpace. She goes, oh, forget it. It's not going to work. So she goes, listen, it's probably too late. Do your thing. But you have to hand it in by Monday, 8:00 a.m. because we're meeting Monday afternoon, and then we're going to cut somebody a huge check, and we're going to give away 65,000 copies of books. So, my friends, what I did was I sat down and I locked myself in my tiny little office, and I wrote this book, Welcome Song for Baby. And I wrote it, and what people don't know about what was happening to me in my life was my mom, Rosa Washi, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was fighting for her life. And my brother, Roger, and his wife, Jillian, were expecting their first baby. And my dear friends, Marty and Zoe, were expecting their first baby. So there I was, cornered emotionally, because as the oldest son of 4 boys, I was cold in the bones for a year as my mom was fighting cancer with chemo and everything that she was doing. And I really do believe it was Shaden, the first grandbaby, that saved her life. I really believe that when my mom found out she was going to be a grandmother for the first time, I really believe that my mom said, oh no, I'm not leaving this planet anytime soon. I need to hold my grandbaby. I need to teach my grandbaby. I need to be here for my grandbaby. And I tell Shaden all the time, you saved grandma's life. You saved my mother's life. And I always tell him that because I believe it's true. So what I did was, for Welcome Song for Baby, was I sat in that office and I thought about how terrified I was that I was going to lose my mother. And thank God my mommy is A-okay. Rosa Washi is alive and well. Thank goodness. Masi Cho, creator. She's 70, I'm 50. But I cornered myself and I thought of all that fear. And underneath it, of course, was all that love. And I thought about all these babies that were wanting to be born, all this new love that was on its way. And I remember my grandfather, Pierre Washi, was a medicine man, and he had this chant, and it was, hey, ya, hey. Every time he'd see us, hey, ya, hey. And I just sat down and I just put everything I could into a lullaby. And that's really how I wrote Welcome Song for Baby. And I sent it in Sunday night. And I think it was Monday, I received notification that it had been accepted. The committee was meeting. And then I think it was 2 weeks later, Bob Tyrell called me from Orca Book Publishers and said, congratulations, Richard. You wrote the one book we're going to give 65,000 copies away from. I'm the publisher of Orca Books Publisher. I love what you've written. We love it all. It's a tearjerker. But congratulations, 65,000 copies are going to be given away courtesy of Books for BC Babies. And it changed my life forever in all the right ways. And in fact, the best part of working with Orca is the books that we put out as baby books. Everyone is translated in Braille for free. You can print up any of our baby books anywhere in the world for free in Braille. And I'm really proud of that. So in this business, there's the do it again factor. Do it again. You could be holding your hands up high like Katerina Vermette with the GG, and somebody could come up to you and go, what else you got? Congratulations, what else you got? And not give you a chance to rest. So Katerina, I'm so glad you're putting a line in the sand and saying, for the next 6 months, I am going to write and I'm going to juggle, but I'm going to earn it. This is where I got fired. Get ready. Don't worry, I'm not going to let you down. You're going to see me crash and burn in about 30 seconds here. So after Welcome Song for Baby came out, we gave away 65,000 copies for free. I was touring like a maniac. Things were good. I was teaching at UBC. I was in Victoria at the office of Orca Book Publishers. And what I would do was I was living in Vancouver and I had no money in those days. And so I would drive my little Honda Civic to the office, the warehouse, and I would load up with these boxes of Welcome Song for Baby. And I'd go back to Vancouver. So you buy it 50% and you sell it 100%. And you hope you sell all your books quickly so you can pay off your visa. It's a vicious circle. And I was in it. I was living it. In fact, I just finished ordering more books just the other day from Orca. Anyways, I love Orca Book Publishers. So here we go. Getting to the point of where I got fired. So Welcome Song for Baby is doing great. Lesser Blessed is doing great. And I'm in the office of Orca, and the publisher, Bob Tyrrell, who published Welcome Song for Baby, just happened to be going into his office and he says, Richard Van Camp, get in the office. Let's have a little talk. I said, sure, Bob. He says, what are you working on these days? What's going on with you? And I said, well, you know, Bob, I'm working on a novel. It's a series of four linked short stories. And he went, no, they don't sell. But we tried that. They don't sell. Can you turn it into a novel? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, it's about 4 teenagers trying to make sense. He goes, no. I'll tell you what, let's do this. You want a book deal? Let's do a book deal. You want to have a book deal today? And I said, I could do a book deal, Bob. He goes, great. So what do we do? 6,000 advance? Is that good? I'll give you 3,000 right now. I said, I could take 3,000 quite happily. He goes, okay, deal. So we're doing a book. What's it called? I said, well, I said, I'm calling it Blessing Wendy. He goes, like it? Like, okay. Working title. Okay. And okay, do you need a year, 2 years? I said, probably 2 years because I'm touring like a maniac. He goes, great. Okay, 2 years. He goes, done. Okay, so 2 years, $6,000. I'll give you $3,000 today. We'll get you a contract, tickety boo here. And but it's got to be a novel, Van Camp. I said, it for 6,000. I'll do whatever you want. Okay, I'll do it. And he goes, great. Okay, congratulations. We got a book. And I walked out, and they cut me check for $3,000. I drove back to Vancouver. I got a big mouth. I told everybody I got a new book coming out. Lesser Blessed move over. It's called Blessing Wendy with Orca. 2 years. 2 years, my friends. I tried. And Bob Tyrrell, I love you. Patron saint of patience with me. He must have read 49 versions of Blessing Wendy. And it never worked as a novel. It would always be 4 linked short stories. And I would try and I would try and I would try and I'd send it with apologies and I would try and weigh him down with love. And just, he could see that this was the greatest writing I'd ever done. It was 4 teenagers trying to make sense of something that had happened in their community. And finally, after 2 years, I remember he sent me an email and the email had no subject line. There was nothing in the email. It was only an attachment. And I've learned the hard way, my friends, that when you get one of those, it's usually a breakup letter or a virus, sometimes both. And I remember double clicking in my little apartment in Vancouver, May 15th, and it was Richard. It was from Bob Tyrrell Orca. Richard, I've been doing this long enough. I'm here to tell you, son, literature is born through AIC. Basically, I'm just going to paraphrase. He said, you got to earn it. You got to sit still. You're touring like a maniac. We're selling more copies of Welcome Song for Baby. We can't print it fast. I'm not mad, Richard. You've given me 49 versions of 4 teenagers, Richard, and that wasn't the deal. This has to be a novel. I'm letting you go. No hard feelings. You can keep the 3,000. Lord knows for 2 years you've been working on this. Basically, and he was very kind, but I was fired. And as a Virgo and as a tax-paying treaty Indian, I was devastated. I was embarrassed. I was horrified. I had to tell the chair that the book deal wasn't going to happen. I had to tell my friends who were all writers. It was deeply horrifying because I was not used to failing and letting people down. Most importantly, I wasn't used to letting myself down when it came to being creative and trying to be magic. And I didn't understand then what I've learned the hard way. And my message to you all today is the story is the boss. The story is the boss. And I really want to thank Bob Tyrell for firing me, because for a couple of years, that was a wound. That was an arterial wound with me. And I did have a couple of other books that had come out and did quite well. But deep down inside, I thought to myself, there was this smoldering ache and this smoldering disappointment in myself that what went wrong? Because when I read these 4 short stories, they're perfect, they're beautiful, they're exactly what I walked into that office 2 years ago with, and I don't understand why this didn't take. And then I met my wife, I moved to Edmonton, and Pearl Jam is playing at Rexall Place just across the bridge. And I think there were 26,000 of us. And we're on a date. And this before we had our beautiful little boy Avie. So it's just Kiwi and I, and we're singing along with 26,000 other, people who love Pearl Jam. And it was a beautiful night. It was great. Eddie Vedder was in fine form. And I remember he stopped the concert about 6 songs in, and he said, "Turn on the lights, turn on the lights. I want to see you, Edmonton. I want to see, let me look at you. This is the last night of our North American tour. I'm going to sing for 3 hours, and I just want to look at you." So they turn on the lights. We're all looking at each other, Edmonton, everybody who traveled to Edmonton to be there. And he goes, "Listen, I need your help, Edmonton. Tonight is my daughter's birthday, and I can't sing you another song until we call my daughter and we sing happy birthday to her. And so I need my phone. Somebody get my phone." And I remember this poor little roadie came out on the stage with Eddie Vedder's phone, and they plugged it into the main line, and he dialed his own home number, and this little girl picked up. She goes, "Hello?" He goes, "Happy birthday, my girl. Happy birthday." She goes, "Daddy, you're supposed to be singing." And he goes, "Oh, sweetie, I am singing. But my girl, I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, with I think 26,000 of my best friends. And my girl, I'm just calling to say happy birthday. And we just wanted to sing to you tonight, happy birthday, because I miss you, I love you, and I'm coming home tomorrow." She goes, "Okay." And Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam goes, and we all started to sing happy birthday. And my friends, as we were singing happy birthday, a little song came to me. And I typed this out, and I'm here to tell you, Katerina, sometimes we try and manufacture, or we beg, or we craft, or we outline. And I know you've channeled before. I'm here to tell you, something divine happened at this Pearl Jam concert, because not even I could see this coming. I ended up thumbing out on my phone this little book, and I'm just gonna read. It takes 10 seconds, and it's called Little You. I thumbed out, little you, little wonder, little wish, gentle thunder. You are mighty, you are small, you are ours after all. Little star with little wings, let's all dance, let's all sing. You are life and breath adored, you are us and so much more. Little ember with growing light, feel our love as we hold you tight. You are the birth of everything new. You are perfect. You are you. I thumbed it out on my little Palm 6 phone with the stylus pen, and it was like being struck by the sweetest lightning. That's the only way I can describe it. And the whole time I couldn't believe that I was lucky enough to have been chosen for this lullaby. And I remember as soon as I don't even remember the rest of the concert. I just couldn't believe that I had this, that I was like, this is what Metallica must have felt when they did the Black Album and Injustice for All, and they knew that the CDs and the cassettes and the records were going to hit the streets. I knew I had something that was more than I ever imagined. I had the most beautiful part of life had throttled through me into this little song. And I waited a couple days and I would read it and I would look at it and I just stood in awe of it. And then I ended up writing to Bob Tyrrell and I said, Bob, I know my name is Mud at Orca Book Publishers. Bob, I've never forgiven myself for letting you down with Blessing Wendy. And I'm here to tell you, I've written something just as beautiful as Welcome Song for Baby. I haven't shown it to anybody else. Please know I've never forgiven myself for letting you down. And I let myself down with Blessing Wendy. And this is yours. It's called Little You. It'll take you 10 seconds to read it. I hope you love it. I really want to be back with Orca because I really appreciate everything that we've done together with Welcome Song for Baby. And I remember the rest of the day, I was like, refresh, 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 nothing. And I was like, refresh. And then finally, 3 hours later, I remember, just to paraphrase with utmost respect to Bob Tyrrell, the email basically said, I always knew you had it in you, kid. We love it. Little You's a hit. He says, everybody loves a comeback, baby. Welcome back. And then the rest is history. So what I'm trying to say is, one of my favorite documentaries of all time, which is on Netflix, you can watch it tonight, is Some Kind of Monster. And it's Metallica's documentary about making Saint Anger. And there's a line in there that the therapist shares with the band, and that is, tension produces results. Tension produces results. And when I look back at Welcome Song for Baby, the terror I had, at the worry of losing, the possibility of losing my mom, and at the same time, all the love that was coming as an uncle for all these babies that were on their way, that needed to happen to create Welcome Song for Baby. Me getting fired by Orca, by Bob, for Blessing Wendy, it had to happen to create Little You. And one of the greatest gifts of working with Orca, of course, has been being able to work with Julie Flett, one of our dream artists. I had wanted to work with Julie Flett for over 8 years. And then not only to be back with Orca, and then to find out that Julie Flett wanted to illustrate it, was beyond my wildest dreams. So I'm here to say that often what you see are the books, but what you don't see behind it, and Katerina was talking about that, is the anguish and the pressure and the tension and the divine wish to channel something beautiful again. And I'm just going to end because I don't want to take it too much time, but those 4 short stories that I wrote, that I walked into Orca that one day with Bob Tyrrell, it was called Love Walked In, The Contract, Blood Rides the Wind, and Feeding the Fire. So those 4 short stories connected to make a beautiful little novella called Blessing Wendy. And what I realized is that what I had was perfect. And the art world goes like this, the publishing world goes like this. Sometimes your stories are going this way. And this, I'm borrowing because another person said this before. If you're lucky enough, every once in a while, they touch. And I was really lucky when I had, not only Little You, but I got to meet Maurice Moreau and Katerina DeBacker of Portage and Maine Books. No, Great Plains, I'm so sorry, Great Plains in Winnipeg. And when I showed them Love Walked In, The Contract, and Blood Rides the Wind, and Feeding the Fire, these 4-length short stories, we ended up doing a trilogy together. We did Night Moves, Godless but Loyal to Heaven, and The Moon of Letting Go. And I'm just so grateful that I've always been able to find the right publisher, the right publishing team, the right editor, the right co-artist to begin collaborating. And collaborating is a dance of trust. That's really where great magic happens. And I'm excited to hear what Samaro's going to ask us. I want to listen to what Katerina has to say. I'm really grateful to all of you for being here tonight, but everything I've told you is true. And I am so grateful. Masi Cho, thank you.
Masi Cho, Richard, my God, I don't know what to say. I could just keep listening to you all evening, you and Katerina. So much energy, so moving. I had tears in my eyes. I was killing myself laughing. You guys are a great duo and you're amazing. Thank you for sharing with us so much of your energy and your creativity. And I should say something that Katerina referred to the title under her name in the program, Story Making. And then the title under Richard's name is Storytelling. And I made them up. because neither of them send me a title. And usually when I plan a series like that, I have a title in advance, and sometimes I even read the talks in advance. And here, there was nothing. And so I thought, okay, she's been talking on email about being on sabbatical and trying to write. And I thought, oh, okay, story making. I had no idea we would be hearing about how bad poetry can read such, can lead you to such beautiful spaces. And with Richard, storytelling, and of course you dramatized it, you performed it beautifully. So at this moment, I'm just in awe of both of you, and I cannot think of any questions, but I just want to thank you for being so generous and sharing those stories, being fired and writing bad poetry, sharing with your audience the poems you wrote when you were 10 and 15. I can't think of any other writer who's done that. So thank you so much. I want to invite you to talk with each other if you want to do that. And then I'm going to keep an eye in the chat area and see what questions we have. Lots of wonderful comments. I'm sure you can see them.
Oh,
Katherena.
I was distracted by the chat. I'll pull it up here. Oh my goodness, this is a busy chat. Look at that book. Look at that book.
I want to ask Katherena, because you and I don't get to visit really as much as we used to. You and I were in the green room getting ready to take the stage with our heroes.
What's
and
that?
The one question I want to ask you, because you work in just about every genre, how do you do your research? That's really what I want to know, because what I'm reading, like, I love A Girl Called Echo, and when I read The Break, I used to be a guard for the RCMP, and you nailed what a cell looks like and feels like and smells like, and even your character running her fingers along the bricks in the jail cell. Can you just tell me really quickly, what is your process? Like when Highwater got in touch with you and said, we want you to do a series on what you want to do, how did you prepare? I mean, when I hold this, I'm thinking of the years of research, the haunting of archives. How do you do what you do? Because you not only have to create a story, but you have to be historically accurate. How do you do that? How?
Well, again, I'm not. Echo was actually, okay, let me tell Echo. And I just want to make sure these feets that are rolling is my daughter, who's gonna interrupt us because she is in charge and she is the boss and she wants to be right here right now. Echo, actually, no one asked me to do that. That was me just talking myself into a job by putting my foot in my mouth, because I was over at Highwater and Portage and Main Press, and I was talking with Catherine and Annalie. What were we doing? It was the 7 teaching stories that I had done a few years ago. That was based on that book series was based on my time working for Aboriginal Head Start. I was an ECE for a number of years and got to hang out with kids. So I was very much inspired by them for my first picture books. But A Girl Called Echo, I was just talking with Catherine and Annalie, and I was saying they were bringing out all these books, and I think your book was just out around that time, and I was like, hey, ladies, we need a little more like diversity in the graphic novels here. All I see is dudes, and Jen Storm's book was there too. And then I said, yeah, and Métis history, come on, you got some Cree, you got some Anishinaabe here, everything, like, let's represent. We're from Winnipeg, we're Portage and Maine after all. And so then of course they just turn around and go, well, you're not a dude, and you like Métis stuff. And I was like, no, I didn't want to write a novel or a graphic novel. I had no idea how to write a graphic novel. Still don't, arguably. But I really thought about it, I really thought about, like, it was so cool, like my kids were telling me, like, graphic novels, that's like totally cool. So, I really wanted to earn they were teenagers at the time. So I really wanted to earn their respect, get some street cred. And I thought of this. Echo came really slowly, and it's true, we do get gifts, gifts is something you said one time in a talk, it's a total Richard Van Camp thing, these gifts we get from creator or whomever. So Echo kind of came a bit like that. And she only came with the tagline, and the tagline was, Echo is a girl with magical powers. She reads books and they come alive. And that was it. That's all I knew. And that's all I went with them. And they said, cool. And then I made the agreement that we were only going to do one book per year for 4 years, because I knew I wanted to do Métis history, and I knew I wanted to go into like the big insurrections, which are the Pemmican Wars, the Red River Resistance, and the Northwest Resistance. And then I don't know what the fourth book was going to be about at the time, but I wanted 4 because I like numbers, and I wanted a year because I knew the research would be so overwhelming, and I had no idea what I was going to do. That's a theme in everything I do. I have no idea. I just do it. I got my friend Dave Robertson to tell me how to write a graphic novel. That was my research first. And then I just kind of dove into all the historical stuff, and did my absolute best to finding the story is easy. It's just so much information, and you just have to tease it down to something. And, I had Echo, who was this little time traveler, and I just kind of followed her around. And I actually got things, speaking of all my mistakes and my bad poetry today, I actually got things wrong. And a few years after the second book, Red River Resistance, came out, I had the great historian Brenda McDougall emailed me, and she's like, I see this date and I can't, and I've asked around and no one knows what this date is. And I looked it up, and it said July 21st, 1870. And I'm like, oh, I don't know where that came from. Like, I was looking it up. I don't know what is July 21st, 1870. And I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked through my drafts, and that was the draft I made, shortly after my daughter was born. So not a time when you should be doing drafts. And it was a typo. It was supposed to be June 21st, 1980. So this historical accurate book that relied on historical accuracy was actually wrong. And I was mortified, and we got it fixed on another printing. And I was mortified and so embarrassed by Brenda McDougall saw that, but so grateful that she caught it. Like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it was hard. And I made mistakes. And I learned a lot, and grateful for that process, for sure.
But both of you write in more than one form, right? And so I'm curious to hear you talk about how you shift from one to the other. You talked a little bit about that, but especially, you talked, Katerina, about writing really being about actually writing, but then you also talked about editing. So is shifting from one form to another similar to editing what you're writing, or how do you kind of go about it? That's for both of you, because both of you have done graphic novels, right? I don't know if you've done baby books, Katerina, but you've done children's books. You write poetry, Richard has done film scripts. So how do you juggle all that?
How do you juggle all that? And the poems, the baby books are poems, hey? Mm-hmm. And you don't write poetry otherwise, that I know of.
Well, so one thing I've come to realize at 50 years of age is that we make a mistake with English instructors in probably grade 8. And they tell future readers, if you want to be a writer, you actually have to be either a poet or a prose writer. And if you're a poet, you're choosing a hard road. You're going to be a barefoot doctor the rest of your life. But if you get into fiction, that's where the money is, and the nonfiction and everything else. And I think that the beauty of going to the Unelkin Center and having instructors like Jeanette Armstrong and Maurice Kenny and Lee Miracle and Beth Brandt, who visited us, and Alatuk Ipali and Thompson Highway, who visited us, Jordan Wheeler, who visited us, is that they really showed us that it's all great storytelling. And you don't have to choose. And going back to the story as the boss, if it wants to be a poem, if it wants to be a lullaby, if it wants to be a novella or a short story or a one-page novel, then your job is that this is a craft. You will always be a student of the craft. It doesn't matter if you've got 3 or 27 or 100 books out. You will always be a humble student of the craft, and you have to be ready at any time, because there could be something that my boy says, who's 7, that just astounds me. And if I can get it down in time, this could be the next baby book, or it could be the next short story. I'll tell you a really quick story about how I received my $1 million line. So I was at a Nickelback concert here in Edmonton. Apparently all the greatest things ever happened to me when I'm at these concerts. So my buddy Junior Mercury got us free tickets to Nickelback. And I love Nickelback because they sing one of my favorite songs called Never Again. One of my favorite songs in the whole world. So I'm at Rexall Place again, where Eddie Vedder gave me the $1 million lightning strike called Little You. And I'm sitting in the back, I'm sitting in the back with Junior Mercury, and there's another gentleman, huge guy, giant guy wearing coveralls and cowboy boots. Can you tell I'm in Alberta? And Nickelback comes on stage, everyone in front of us stands, and I was like, excuse me, we don't need to stand for 3 hours. We can sit. You know, Chad said he was going to sing for 3 hours. So can we just all sit? And, you know, how dare you tell anybody in Alberta to do anything? Everybody in front of me just looked at me and went, no, we're not. We're going to stand. And that means you're going to stand. And I was like, oh, I can't believe this. I can't believe we're going to stand for 3 hours when Chad said he was going to sing for 3 hours. Doesn't it make sense we could sit and actually enjoy ourselves? I can't believe this. Can you believe this? Junior's like, I can't believe this. Oh God. Oh God. And I look at this gentleman to my left and I go, sir, can you believe that we have to stand for the next 3 hours? And this big gentleman, I mean, he must have been 6'3", 300 pounds. He stands up and he goes, well, this is going to be about as much fun as a gut full of pinworms. And he stood up and we stood beside each other for 3 hours. I don't remember the rest of that concert. I was like, that is the greatest anything I've ever heard. And that's exactly what Torchy would say in a story called Godless but Loyal to Heaven. And the rest of the concert, I had, and I know, Katerina, you know what I'm talking about. When you've got that $1 million line and there's nothing to write on, and you just, I mean, you would chomp down a tree if you could, you know, get your teeth marks into the shape of the words that you could possibly leave you. And I just remember as soon as I got home, Godless but Loyal to Heaven was written very, very quickly. But that gentleman gave me the perfect key into the perfect story that only Torchy could tell. And I'm grateful. I never caught his name, but I'm so grateful. And that's what being a writer and a disciple to the craft of writing is all about, is just being ready, having your phone ready so that you can either do, you've probably done this as well, where you actually reenact dialogue for the next day. So acting out entire scenes. My little notepad here has thumbed out entire scenes. I'm always so grateful when something that magic comes my way. And anyways, that's all I really want to say about that. Masi Cho.
Well, I do have a question from Jay. I will read it out to you just in case you cannot read it or see it. I have a question, Jay says, for both Katerina and Richard. How do you both maintain belief, faith, confidence, however you want to put it, in your own writing and processes when things feel bad?
Sorry, I was muting because it's going to heck over here. How do I maintain confidence? That's a good question, because I think that it's not always the easiest answer. I don't know I think it's an everyday. I mean, I think it's in, like, you know, like I was saying with this process, you know, like it is like Richard said, you know, you are always thinking about what's next. You are always trying to outdo yourself. You're always in competition with yourself. More than, you know, I don't like being in competition with anyone else. I think that's a total lie that we're told, you know, as if anyone else could be me or I could be anyone else, you know, like we're all individual voices, and the competition is completely false, because there's so much space for all of us, and one person's success doesn't take away from another person's success, and everyone's story is completely unique and valid and necessary. Absolutely. So I don't know how I maintain that confidence. I think it's constantly this process. I love what Richard was saying about being a disciple to the craft. I mean, really it is about, and I think of Marvin's quote often, you're a writer if you're writing. You know, I love that. It's baseline, it's action. You know, loving the actual work is so much more important than output and, you know, making things and making them happen. That's great, making them happen. That's, you know, there's always this long drawn out process at the end where you have to deal with copy editors and proofreaders, and where you realize that I realize I'm really, really messy and really, really grateful for those people. And then I really, you know,
That's all that.
it's true. But that's all the drudgery, you know. My confidence is best when I write a new poem, even before it's edited, you know, just that feeling of getting it out, you know, just that feeling of getting those lines. I love writing dialogue. I never thought I would say that, because as a student I hated dialogue, and I never thought I had a knack for it or a whack for it. But I really got into the idea of listening and eavesdropping to people, and I love hearing those voices just go in my head sometimes and fixing them later. But I love the doing. And Ruby
This
loves
is
it.
Ruby.
This is Ruby. I apologize.
You need to apologize.
This is how it goes. You know, she's very entertaining, more entertaining than me.
Richard, do you
Messy
want
Cho.
to
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. I think it was actually Lee Miracle who said that if you're crying when you're writing it, and if you're howling with laughter when you're writing it, your readers will howl where you have howled, and your readers will weep where you have wept. And I really do believe that. And you know, when I was doing my master's at UBC, the great Keith Millard, our instructor, said that, you know, a story is done when, he said, a story is like a house. And every day when you're rewriting and you're reworking it, if you walk through the house and everything is perfect, and there's a vase of flowers on a table, and you just turn it a little bit, and the next day when you show up, you look at the same vase and everything's perfect, and you turn it back, that's the moment you know it's done. And you have to be really careful, because you can actually wreck something if you keep going back and keep going back. So I think that as a writer, I think that I'm a pretty good writer, but it's actually my editors who make me greater than I ever imagined. And what you see, to answer your question, behind every short story or novel or baby book or comic book are hundreds of rewrites. And I've always said, writing is like combing tangled hair. And your job is to show up over and over and over. And I'm sure, Katherena, you and I are the same, where you send it off to your publisher or agent and you go, all done, things are great, oh my goodness, get ready. Next day, actually, I need more time. Everybody hates my guts, but they understand that the instinct and the wish is just to make it better and deeper. And one of the characters just told me something that I forgot, or somebody just gave me that $1 million line that I need to go back and rehash. They all get it. Everything takes so much longer, but you can't rush it. It takes as long as it takes. So Lesser Blessed took me 5 years to write. Little You took me 2 minutes to write. What's the Most Beautiful Thing You Know About Horses? I was only given 5 days to write. Everything takes as long as it takes, and you have to be gentle with yourself and say, I accept that the craft is asking me to dive back in. Now, what publisher is going to deny you that one divine wish to just make it better? Because it's a dance, right? Publisher, editor, writer, copy editor. It's a collaboration. And ultimately, that book, when you see it, it's really an army standing with you that's helped you get there. And I'm just so grateful to all my publishers, so grateful, and especially to my editors.
I'm so glad to hear that. I've done a lot of work as an editor over the years, and quite often the editor is like a ghostwriter, kind of an invisible presence. And so it's really wonderful to hear you talk about that part of writing. But listening to you both, I realized we've got a lot of things in common. And one of them is that you create characters, but you do not abandon them when a book ends. you recreate them in a sequel or in another book. That happens with many of your characters in the novel, Richard, whom we see in some of your short stories. And Katerina, your two novels, The Break and The Strangers, really are about the same family at different stages of their lives. So can you talk about that, about what makes you want to continue the lives, the stories of those characters, and how does it feel if you feel you've reached the moment of saying goodbye to them and moving on to a different set of figures, of people, of characters?
Me, I think, again, it's if the story is the boss, I think the characters are definitely the boss. I think if you do the work of the character, I'm all character, you know, like I'm a character from TV shows to movies to books to comics. I'm all about the character. If I don't feel something for the character, and as a writer, I do that too. I want to make a character that I want to spend time with, or at least love to hate, which is kind of what I do, what I like to do best, really. But I don't want to play attention to the plot. You know, I want to watch them just go. You know, I want to kind of hang out with them. I want to have tea with them. You know, my poor characters, when you put them in a fiction book, things keep having to happen to them. And I always feel so bad for them because they can't just sit around and have tea with me and just hang out and heal. But there's this constant churning of things that are happening. But the character will tell you when they're done. The character will tell you when they need a rest, you know. I've been writing these novels and they're interconnected and they're continuations. I don't know if you can hear Ruby screaming in the background, but she's, you know, accentuating her dad's with her. She's fine. But they just kind of told me where they wanted to go. And like some of the characters in The Break are not in The Strangers. There's only one character that really continues on to The Strangers. And I just wrote the third book, or I'm just like, you know, going to start the long editing process of the third book, where I actually felt like I was saying goodbye to a lot of these characters. And it's bittersweet, right? You know, because you don't want to really let them go, but you also have to just let them rest too. You know, I hope when my characters leave that they're going off and just doing their own thing and having tea and relaxing without any plot being bombarded upon them. So that's an easy way to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to mute, so hopefully she'll stop. Apologize.
No need to apologize at all.
I agree. I just wanted to compliment what Katerina is saying is sometimes you think you're done with the characters, but sometimes the characters aren't done with you. There's still more work to be done. And I'm just so lucky to work with publishers who understand that even though, you know, Torchy and Sven and Snowbird may be in a graphic novel and a couple of short stories, that doesn't mean that years later they can't be with a different publisher in a new story. They really understand. And I'm really grateful to work with the publishers that I do, because they do understand that right now it's this expanding universe. And sometimes these characters come back younger, sometimes older, sometimes alive, and sometimes not. And anyways, it's always astounding when Torchy shows up, or Larry, or Snowbird. And again, that's the magic of it all. It's like, here we go again. And then the trick now is having to reread all the stories where these characters are intertwined and ask, okay, how old are they now? And is this before Sven passes away? Is this when Benny the Bank, before he fights Snowbird? Is this when Snowbird could see? Where are we in the timeline of things? And it's actually doing your own research on what you've created, or what your characters have created with you. That's a whole different alchemy that can produce some pretty interesting things as well. I'm the biggest fan of what I'm working on, because I'm always so surprised with what the characters want to do and where they want to go.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have a chance to look at the comments. People are raving about your generosity, about your wonderful things you're sharing with us. There's one more question here that I will read out to you from Rodena Ibrahim. Right now, the book industry is very full of stories and books. Do you ever feel like, oops, I lost it because someone else, okay, here I'm, I'll start again. Right now, the book industry is very full of stories and books. Do you ever feel like you do not want to do something that has not been done before? And does this hinder or help your writing? Do you ever feel like you do not want to do something that has not been done before? And does this hinder or help your writing?
I feel like I'm on a talk show, like,
Yes.
game
You
show,
are on a talk
a
show.
game show, a game show, like, I don't, it's kind of cliche advice, but I really like it and try to think of it when I'm writing, is that I don't concern myself with what else is there and what else is happening. I feel like, particularly within our groups, you know, we're all having a conversation. Writers are always having a conversation with one another, you know, and I think amongst Indigenous authors particularly, we're having this conversation amongst Canadian writers, women writers, all of the groups that I belong to. I'm honored to belong to. I think we're just talking with one another, you know, like a lot of these, I just read a beautiful memoir a couple weeks ago by Katherena. Remember that name? He's there. It's coming out in, I think, this year. Yeah, this year, because Katherena. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And that really, you know, the love that he shared really, you know, I've never wanted to write a memoir, but because I'm so scared of it. But the love that he shared really inspired me, I think, to write these poems about my childhood and my bad poetry, because I do write a lot of self story through poetry, even though I will never write a memoir. Quote me, I won't. I cannot do the genre justice. But when I'm writing, I really just try to pay attention to my story. You know, it's my crafting of my part of the conversation. And then if it fits, it fits. Hopefully it hasn't been done before. Sometimes it has, or it seems similar to somebody else's. And sometimes we're seen as being similar to someone else, you know, like, I don't know how many times I've been confused with another Indigenous female author, you know, and we're not the same. We're so very, very different, and we have so many different things to offer, you know, but on the outside, maybe people think we're doing the same thing. We're not, you know, everybody has their story that they're telling, and everyone has their specialness to add to the pot. How that's perceived and what happens after, I think you can't control that. So I try not to think about it when I'm doing it.
I have, Richard, do you want to take this on?
No, Katerina nailed it. Everything she said.
Kat will take 3 or 4 more questions. So one of them is from Madille. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. So thanks for this wonderful session. One question: how do you manage writing when you also have to do other jobs like teaching, especially when you feel you want to write a story, but at the same time you have other responsibilities? Basically, I'm talking about moments that characters want to be written, but you are just busy and don't afford the time to write at the moment. Such a good question, I think. Richard, you want to take this on first?
Sure. My publisher, Tanya Martin with McKellar and Martin, shared with me, she was an editor with Raincoast and Scholastic, and of course now she's a publisher with McKellar and Martin. But she said that there's a polite argument happening between editors, and it's been going on since time immemorial, that there are 2 kinds of writers. There's the engineer, the scientist, the technician, like myself, who every day, it's a page a day is a book a year, page a day is a book a year, page a day. We're methodical. We get up at the same time. We have our soundtracks. We have our ways and our methods to craft our stories. So personally, I get up at 4 o'clock, sometimes 5 o'clock, to get up, because I know that once my little boy gets up at 6:30 or 7 and says, "Daddy, Richard Van Camp, the author, goes away," and Daddy, you know, Richard, that's when I cook and I clean and get the laundry going, and it's great. So that tension of knowing that it's up to me, I'm in charge I'm responsible to fill my own love cup, because once I've had a great writing day, I'm only a better human being, a better husband, better father, better brother, better son. So I'm one of those engineers that has got, got it down to the discipline, to the timing. And then to answer your question, I make notes all day about what I need to do the next morning. So I go to bed at 9 o'clock every night, get up at 4 or 5, get my writing done. Fantastic. So that's the first kind of writer. The others are the channelers. And the channelers, and Eden Robinson, I believe, is a channeler. Eden has talked about writing an incredible work and then not being able to write for months, and being quite hard on herself, saying, it's just, I don't understand why this isn't happening. I've got all this pressure, everyone's waiting for the next book. And sometimes it'll be a typo in a menu. Sometimes it'll be bad perfume 30,000 feet up in the air over the Pacific Ocean. And then boom, you're hit, and then your months of typing and writing, and then boom, print, it's perfect. So the key is sometimes to remember that you can be both. So Katherena, you may be getting ready, you may be doing the big soul inhale to channel. But all I know is that, to answer your question, for me, it's getting up at 4 or 4:30 or 5, working, getting everything done that I need to do, and then just taking the rest of the day off and really going easy and using the rest of the day to just filter, feel, crank the tunes, read great books, just be there, be present in my life. At the same time, making notes for tomorrow. It's always a better day when I've got everything done that I wanted to do. And I just believe that you're showing the universe, I am here, I'm ready. It's AIC, baby. It's ass and chair. I'm your humble disciple. Put me to work. I'm here, baby. I love it. So Katerina, do you feel you're the first, you're the engineer, or are you the channeler?
I've never heard that before. I love that. I'm somewhere in between, when things are happening, like perfect writing day is I get everybody out of my house. That's my first thing every morning, is I just like literally go through, let the dog out, get the kids to daycare, everything. And then once it's all cleared, I usually got a couple hours and I can write furiously. I like inspiration though. I like starting at a place. I might just know, just the starting point, but then I go for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. Usually once I get hungry, I stop, so sometime around lunchtime, but that's it. Cause I have that kind of energy in the morning, and I know that about myself. For years, so many years, I was working, I was going to school, I was keeping myself frantically busy, and I only and everything was all about writing, always getting into the writing and trying to get writing happening, but I wasn't leaving much time for writing because of the necessity of life, feeding and watering my children. So back then I remember I only ever wrote Saturday morning, because I'm a total morning person, begrudgingly sometimes. That's when I like to write. That's when the pistons are firing. But I only had Saturday mornings. So that's what I did. And I would write poems. Slowly, my first book of poems took a long time to put together. But I that time was like anything else in my agenda. It was sacred, even if I was just, moving commas around the page, it was my stuff. And just time, so there's always time for what you love. And sometimes it's after the kids go to bed or before the kids get up, or sometimes it's not until after they grow up. Whatever works, but I wanted to add one of my favorite writing teachers, Catherine Hunter. She's a poet and brilliant poet here in Winnipeg, and she was my professor years and years ago. Back when I was in a poetry class of hers, I was writing poetry, and my computer, because it was back in the day when we got all sorts of viruses all the time. Well, we still do, but I had an old PC and was always getting viruses, and my computer crashed. And I think like my floppy disk wasn't working. This is how long it was, and I lost my whole project. I lost like 10 pages of poems, and I was devastated. And I remember telling her, this happened, I'm devastated. I think I was crying even, like, these poems are gone. And she said, why are you stressing? These poems are from you. They're still inside of you. You know, she's like, I challenge you to go and recreate them. So really what she was saying is she wasn't letting me off the hook, and I still had to hand in my assignment. So I went back and I tried and I recreated them, and they weren't the same. You know, some of them were better and some of them were not quite right. And I let them kind of flow and change them a little bit, you know, but they were still the same poems, you know, because it was still inside me. And I always think of that when I don't write something down in time, or I don't get my writing time or something. It's like, they're still inside me, you know, they'll come when the planets align, when they choose to, because they're in charge, right? So.
Yes, like the story is the boss. I knew Kathleen Hunter. She was my student many moons ago. We have another question from Corey, who asked it a long time ago, and I couldn't scroll far enough to see it. So thank you for posting it again, Corey. And that's about poetry. So I guess it's for you, Katerina. Corey would be interested to hear your opinion on poetry, especially the spoken form of poetry versus written form of poetry.
Opinions of poetry. They're all good. I'm a bit, you know, I think poetry is probably, my unpopular opinion is, poetry is more diverse than any other genre of writing. There is so many multitudes of poetry, from narrative, you know, like what I kind of been attempting with my bad poetry. That's a very, you know, a lot of indigenous poetry is very narrative. It very much takes from the oral tradition. It's so close to story. And then you have the very fine lyrical, you have the experimental, you have the spoken word, which is brilliant when allowed. And it's also brilliant on the page. It's just, it's a different rhythm altogether, but there's so many rhythms to grab with poetry. And I think poems, individual poems, make the rules as far as their rhythm and their rules and what happens with them. But there's so much to happen with poems. I think there's such a variety in poetry, and it is in many ways like that. This was something else that Catherine said. I think that poetry is, I think it was Catherine. Poetry is uncorrupted because there's no money in it. So it's still yet uncorrupted, as opposed to fiction or memoirs or whatever, you know, everyone's working for dollars. But poets are doing it for love. So, because there's no other reason to do it. You're not getting anything else.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Two questions, the last ones for both of you. One is from Tristan. How do you manage to have your devotion to all aspects of writing life not negatively affect your interpersonal life? Is this a constant negotiation? Richard?
I got nothing. I don't know. I've never negatively impacted. I feel like every morning when I get up and write, it just makes me a better everything to the planet. And I'm so lucky to just live the life that I do, and to be home and cooking and cleaning and enjoying our little boy and spoiling my wife. I just live to make her laugh, and it's a really beautiful life. It really truly is. And to get up every morning and to have these characters waiting for me, and to be able to work, you know, right now we're working on books 2 and 3 of A Blanket of Butterflies with High Water Press, and I really want to just thank them, because like yourself, Katerina, when I came out with the first graphic novel, A Blanket of Butterflies, which is right here, the characters weren't done with me. This is about a real suit of samurai armor that ended up in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. There's 3 theories about how the suit of samurai armor ended up in Fort Smith. I don't give 2 hoots about the other theories. I only give 2 hoots about my theory. But I feel that this suit of samurai armor, which is still in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, was supposed to go to Fort Smith, Arkansas, where there's a real war memorial museum. It was a typo. So we've been taking very good care of this suit of samurai armor. And I wrote this story. I got to work with Scott Henderson, who is, I know, Katerina, you've been able to work with Scott, who is amazing. He is a living treasure. And I'm really proud that this story takes place in my community, Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. And I want to just give a shout out to how amazing High Water Press is, because I sat down and I wrote book 2 just by myself, completely unsolicited. And I ended up sending it to Annalie and Catherine, the publishers of High Water and Portage and Maine, and they loved what I'd sent. Book 2 is called As I Unfold You in Petals. And it's beautiful, it's magnificent. I knew that it was great. And they wrote back and said, we love it, and we're not only going to buy it, we want you to write another one. We'll actually buy 2 books off you. So not only was it a book deal based on spec, but it was suddenly, not only are we going to buy this, but you have to write a book 3. And for me to work with Scott Henderson, and now, of course, I know, Katerina, you get to work with colorist Donovan Yakuik, I believe is his last name. Yakuik. You're going to have to correct me on that. But to work every day now on book 2 and 3, and Scott and Donovan only work at night. So every morning when I get up, tomorrow morning when I get up, I get to see the finished colorized pages of the next 2 graphic novels we're putting out. It's so amazing. There are no negative effects to what's happening in my life right now. And again, I think the gift of the pandemic is it just showed how important a safe home is, a house filled with good cooking, sweet love, great tunes, great books, and community and the great outdoors. I'm really grateful for what I get to do every day. And, I'm so grateful, we get to visit tonight. Hopefully there's writers that we've inspired, readers that we've given that, aha, that's how they do it. I'm just so grateful every single day. And I don't remember a time, maybe this happens as you get on in years, but I'm 50, as you know, and I just wake up every day so grateful. I get to watch my little boy. I get to hold my son's hand today, and we get to play after school. I get to watch him learn. He's learning to read. I actually feel like I'm cheating the whole pandemic because I sit in my chair, he's reading for the first time by himself, and I've got these tears in the corner of my eye, and I'm like, I know it's a global pandemic, but this is so beautiful. And thank you, Creator, for giving me another day here to witness the beauty of this incredible life and on this beautiful planet together. I'm grateful.
Richard is the most unrelentlessly positive person, and I love that. I love the energy that comes. And it's all over Richard's work too, by the way, for those of you who haven't picked up enough. What was the Moccasin Square Gardens?
Moccasin Square Gardens.
Square Gardens, obviously a play on Madison. Yes, I love that book. I love them all. I have them all. Godless and Loyal to Heaven might be my favorite, but Moccasin Square Gardens is right up there. I love it. And it's all of that positivity is always in and humor and storytelling is all over the written page. I'm not like that. I often write about really heavy things. And my advice is always to just wrap that heaviness, because sometimes it has to be heavy, just wrap it in love and self-care. I learned that the hard way, and I teach that to every writer who will listen. Like self-care is so important, especially if you're writing the hard stuff. Sometimes you just have to, take a break, take a bath, take a walk. My dog has saved me, from hard scenes, because I get to take him to the dog park at the end of the day, which is the happiest place on earth. Outside of children, dog parks, I think, are the favorite places. But yeah, it's just all about that self-care. Self-care, I think, is really important for any of us, all of us, at all times. But when the writing gets hard, especially, douse yourself with the self-love.
2 more questions, I promise, because time is by fast. So this one is from Winona. Who do you see as your audience? That's a question for both of you. How does it feel to you to know that in academia, your work is taught from a Western settler perspective, often missing Indigenous culture or significance of names and words? So how does that feel? Or who do you feel that is your best audience? That's become a habit.
Me. My first audience is the aunties. I always think of the aunties. I always think my first audience is me. My first audience is me trying to get through something or figure something out or make something beautiful or, hide my true stories in fiction, the ones that, I would get thrown out of town for telling. I just hide them in fiction. But it is for me. But then my first audience is always aunties. You know, I want to get it right. I want to be respectful. I want to make sure I am being honest with who I am and where I come from, you know, because I know if I'm wrong, they'll tell me. and I will and I do not want to disappoint them because they're mean, or can be mean. They're tough, is what they are. And I think I love writing where it feels like I love writing. I read all sorts of things, and I read all sorts of different ways of living in this planet. And my favorite writing is when it feels like you're overhearing a conversation. You know, you're just eavesdropping. You know, you're just. I don't want to be explained. I don't want you to tell me about your world and you know, explain these things that I can Google. You know, I want to just know what it feels like. And what your story is, you know, so that's what I like to do too. And as far as, you know, academics, I love academics. I love English teachers. They buy a lot of books. That's really nice. I love, you know, hearing about students' reactions to what I've written. That's really, really a special relationship that I never thought I'd have. So I really like it. You know, everyone's take is going to be different, and you can't really control that. You know, I don't know what to say beyond that. You know, they might get things wrong. They can also email me and ask me, and I can set them right. But I don't know. I mean, different answers can be valid even if they're from different perspectives. And learning about different people who are different than you is invaluable. So.
Richard?
You know, I'm continually in awe of where our stories end up. I had written a little short story called My Fifth Step. It's an Angel Wing splash pattern published by Kigadon's Press. And you know, it's a story about recovery. It's a story about sobriety. It's a story about self-forgiveness. And it's a love letter to somebody that you can never get back because you blew it so horribly. And anyways, I had heard a couple of years after Angel Wing Splash Pattern had come out that in Ontario, there was a community where there was a young man and he was in love with his best friend, young woman, but he never had the guts to tell her that, you know, I'm crazy about you and I don't want to be in the friend zone and I just want to spoil you and I want to cook for you and I just want to pamper you and treat you right. And of course, she chose the bad guy. She chose a really bad dude. And so this gentleman decided, you know, I can either be her best friend and confidant, or I could blow it all and tell her how I feel, that Ricky's a freaking loser and you should leave him and be with me because I've always been here for you and I love you. It just wasn't happening. That conversation hadn't happened. Anyway, this young lady tried leaving her boyfriend and unfortunately was beaten and was hospitalized, and it was horrible and it was sad. And several weeks later, after she got out of the hospital, she was quite nervous about going back to school because everybody knew that she'd been, you know, assaulted and beaten. And she was in grade 12. And so the morning that she decided to go back to school and start catching up to her class, her dad went to go start his car and there was a note underneath the dad's windshield. And so, of course, the dad grabbed it, opened it, and realized, oh, this was not from the boyfriend who beat up my daughter. This is from her best friend who hadn't been able to see her for weeks. And so the dad walked into the house and said, my girl, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to look. I think this is a love letter for you. And she goes, what? So she goes into her room and she opens it up. And what this young man had done is he had taken whiteout. And so he had photocopied My Fifth Step and he'd whited out my name and he'd put his name in. And it was, so this short story was his love letter and they ended up going out. And I think that is so beautiful. That's the ultimate compliment to you know, the work that we do. That I've always said, when you publish, you're firing an arrow of light that's no longer yours, and you never know where it's going to end up. And I just know that, you know, the beauty of now is that I know we're making history, we're writing our history, we're reclaiming our history, and we get to do it with our friends and our heroes. And years from now, Katerina, you and I and Samaro and Kyle, the technician from heaven, we're all going to be together. And there's going to be a whole new generation of writers and spoken word poets that are going to say, you know, it was Katerina Vermette, and it was Richard Van Camp, and it was fill in the blank of everybody who's doing Sri Demeline, Jordan Wheeler, fill in the blank, everybody who's doing stuff right now. It's us that is breaking the trail. So we are the Alatuk Police, the Beth Brants, the Lee Miracles, Jeanette Armstrong. You know, we are that army of light that broke trail for us. We're that army now for future generations. And the trail has been broken so beautifully by our heroes, and many of whom are still with us, by the way. But I just really wanted to give a huge shout out to you know, Ruby Slipperjack and Christos and Jen Armstrong and Lee Miracle, Maurice Kenny, everybody who broke trail, everybody who is doing what we're doing now, and they just did it so well. And you know, the first wave of Indigenous writers that are still here, they're only getting better. That's the best part, is everybody's doing such great work. And when I wake up in the morning, I can almost hear the scribbling across this country of ours of all these writers that are just working on such great stuff. And the best part of what we do is you never know who's going to come out of left field and just knock us all on our socks and just astound us with their craft. I'm really excited for what's coming. You and I, Katerina, we've already read and we've blurbed some of the books that are coming. And I'm really excited for 2022. And I'm excited to read a new book, a short story collection that's coming on 2023. I'm really excited for what's coming, because what I'm finding with Indigenous literature is we're starting to get into genres. So horror, erotica, speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, and it's juicy and it's delicious and it's terrifying and it's horrifying and it's terribly exciting. So you got to hold on, everybody. You know, all storms pass, and we're going to get through this storm together, one day at a time, one book at a time, one story at a time.
Wow. The last question is about your inspiration, but I think you've already answered that in more ways than one. And what you've just said, Richard, and what you shared with us, Katerina, has been so awe-inspiring, so moving, so generous. And I can hardly wait to put my hands on your own books and all the other Indigenous books and stories. And I want to thank you and the other Indigenous writers for being so generous and patient with us settlers and sharing your stories with us. It's such an honor and a gift to be part of this process as your faithful and delighted and astonished readers. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for story making, for bad poetry, for listening, attending wild concerts in Edmonton. And I want to thank this wonderful audience we had. One gentleman, I don't know him, he was from India. He said, goodbye, I have to go to work. It's 7 a.m. in the morning. So thank you for being with us, all of you, for your wonderful comments. It's such an affirmation that the words, storytelling, words, oral or written, matter so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Masicho, everybody. Bless you all. Bless your families. Be safe, and we'll see you when it's safe to do so. Huge hugs. Masicho, have a great night. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, Samero. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Katerina. I stand in continuous awe of all of you. Masicho, have a great night. Bless you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Marcy.